Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturrate, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Why don't you start from the very beginning?
The very beginning. Well, the very beginning was Jerry Bohlander bringing to me a VHS copy that his uncle recorded of UFC 1, and he was like so stoked. He's like, "Holy shit, Pete, you gotta see this." And we watched that tape, and of course, we were hooked.
Which UFC was it?
UFC 1.
Oh wow, the first one.
Yeah, first one. Yeah, the very first one. So, right off the bat, you just watch Gerard Gordeau, face kick, Tui out, and we were like, holy shit, what did we just, come across?
Pete, so is that the first time you laid eyes on Ken Shamrock?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was the first I've ever peeked into that world at all. I wasn't in martial arts. Always, interest. You watch martial arts movies, pro wrestling. But I never had any martial arts training other than high school wrestling. So and I didn't really follow in classic martial arts, sports. So this was really my first introduction into that whole scene.
It's really good. So Chris Lytle's joining us. Chris,
what's happening, team? What's happening, guys?
We got El Dudo with us. Pete Williams, brother.
Pete Williams, how the hell you doing, man?
Good, man. How you been?
Great, man. Long time no see or anything.
Yeah, I think we were at a couple events together. I don't remember these dates exactly or anything.
That's what we got Mike for.
Yeah, that's what Mike's here for, man. So
Japan.
No,
if you had to guess between Chris, yourself, and Pete, you guys probably ran into each other more in Japan than you did in the United States.
Probably not. He was usually doing probably more the pride thing. I was more the Pancrase thing. So
no cornering?
Different organizations, they didn't mesh well, Mike. They don't like each other.
Pete, you weren't cornering a lot in Japan?
Yeah. I would corner a guy, Ken, Trey Tellerman, a few of the guys on different events, depending on who could make it. We all, just kind of filled in wherever needed.
That's cool. Hey. So you and Jerry Bohlander, high school wrestlers. Jerry seems like the type that may have been pushing the gas pedal a lot in order to get to the next gear. And you seem more of like a laid-back guy. How do you two connect so well?
I don't know. I think friendships and relationships in general are, there's a mix of personalities and dynamics that work well. You can't have, two guys that are too necessarily similar. But I don't know. I remember meeting Jerry. We had a math class in high school, and there was one day where he's like, he comes to me. I don't know why. I was the bigger guy. I don't know, but he's like, "Yeah, I gotta fight this guy. Just stand here, watch my back, so his friend doesn't, jump in on me." And so I did. He kind of just got this guy in a headlock. The kid kind of tapped out, and we went to math class. And from then on, we just started hanging out.
Well, your career starts July 22nd, 1996. It's in Pancrase. It's a 2-day tournament. And right off the bat, Ken sends you into a 4-man. So how long have you been training prior to this?
Oh, so that was the Neil Blood tournament, and I think I was training. I started in September, of 95, and I think that was in
July of 96. Okay.
So maybe 9 months.
So had you had to go through the whole, the tryouts where you do the 500 squats and all? Had you had to go through that whole thing, or was that before that?
Oh yeah, no. That actually, well, the tryouts evolved. Like originally, it was just you had to fight either Ken or one of the fighters and just kind of get your ass kicked. Then it switched to the format with the kind of like the physical trial kind of thing. You still had to do 10, 15 minutes each of boxing or kickboxing and MMA or grappling. But it wasn't just the same kind of ass beating that was the original method, and also brought back on certain occasions, where maybe it was a special tryout.
So talk about your tryout. Did you get Ken full on? You're a big guy, so you probably had to get the big guy treatment. No.
Well, luckily, no. I was actually in the class for maybe a week, and I was doing real well. And Ken came to me while I was stretching out one class and asked me, he's like, "Hey, you Pete?" And I'm like thinking, and this is the first time I've seen him or talked to him, and I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm stretching out on the mat. And I'm looking up at him like, "Holy shit!" He's like, I heard you doing pretty well in the class. I got this tryout coming up next month. I want you to try out for the team." So without even really kind of thinking this through, I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll do it." So I was kind of committed, I guess, from that point, and started getting ready for this tryout. But the day of the tryout came, and it was just scorching hot, like 103 in Lodi. And we're out at the football field, running bleachers, doing all just all the crazy stuff. Duck walks up this super steep hill and running with guys on our shoulders. And the funny thing is, we go right back to the gym for the other part of this. But we're riding in this old school limo, and the windows don't roll down. It's like black limo. So we're just roasting in the back of this fucking limo. And yeah, so we get back there. The first thing I do is just run to the bathroom, puke my guts out, and and then get right back to the 500 squats and push-ups, and then the wrestling and the kickboxing, which luckily was not with Ken. It was I think I had to kickbox with Vern and wrestle with Jerry. I'm pretty sure it was. I don't know. I was pretty out of it at that point. But,
was Jerry in the same group as you, or were you guys in different groups?
No, he was in a good maybe 2 months before me. And he was the one who was, just harassing me to go out there. I was like, "Nah, I'm not going to go out there." And he's like, "Just come to the class. Just come to the class." And, I finally did, and did kind of well in there. And then, the rest was just Ken. It's probably seeing a big guy who could wrestle and was like, let's get this guy. He's, we could use another big guy.
Is there anybody else in your trial group that notable that we know who they are? Was it just we the only one who really made it?
I made it along with another guy, and man, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. I want to say we called him. His name was Ken. We called him Young Ken, and he was there for a while. He lasted longer than most people, but I think eventually he decided that this was not the life for him. So he called it quits.
So those practices, they sound absolutely horrific and brutal.
Yeah.
It appears to me that your entire weekend, you're looking like you've got a pumpkin on the side of your head just from practice. Like you're constantly explaining where your lumps came from. Am I off on that?
You know, yes and no. We didn't beat each other up that much while I was there. As far as like leaving like, you know, big bruises on our faces, our head. We did a lot of, extreme shit, and really it depended on whether Ken was there or not. How extreme the training was. When he wasn't there, we would go hard, no doubt. But when Ken was there, it was like, okay, now we're gonna fucking see what you guys are made of, kind of shit. It's
Do you feel like Ken was kind of like the main head instructor there, or was he just another guy working out? Do you have any real instructors, or was it just you guys teaching each other how to fight?
It was us teaching each other how to fight, and with some of obviously Ken would teach us, but Ken wasn't the let's sit down, let's go over technique.
Yeah.
Ken would just put a whooping on you and you had to survive, so you were just kind of learning by just trying to not get fucked up, and which had its merits. And I think once he was gone and we were fighting with each other, we definitely took some of those lessons and just like, okay, this is maybe some stuff we got to work on, but yeah, a lot of it was, Frank, for the first year or so before he left. And me, Jerry, there was another guy, Jason DeLucia's guy, who tried out a little bit later on, Hagar, and Vern, obviously. And we were just, watching video, watching Pancrase, watching the fights, checking out moves, and just kind of rolling. And, the good thing was we were competitive, and we were, really trying to, to win, I guess, in these training matches. But it was also, we were really kind of tight as a team, and no one was, trying to hurt each other, or no one was ashamed if they got caught in something. So we were just trying crazy shit just to experiment, and sometimes we'd do like a really, really cool move, something we hadn't seen, and we just, okay, let's, what happened there? Let's just keep, messing with this. And it really, really allowed us to kind of learn really, really fast.
And it's funny, that sounds like the way we were doing stuff back in Indianapolis where I live, like Jason Gatz, I know a guy you fought later, but a lot of the same stuff, everybody just kind of teaching each other and learning. It wasn't like there was a blueprint and there was no, there might have been a Gracie's place, but not in Indianapolis. So you're just kind of trying to learn by figuring it out yourself. So, but on a real quick side note, how did you do in that Neo Blood tournament?
So I was runner up.
Well, you can't take them through it. No, Chris, this is fantastic. Here, so it's July 22nd, 1996. His first fight is Kima Koniko. I don't know. I'm not familiar with them. He wins the decision. That's on day one. Right. Day two, he fights Osami Shibuya. He wins the decision, and then he goes into the finals against a guy that just beat Semmy Schilt Ikiichiro Yamamiya, otherwise known as Yuki Kondo.
Yes.
It's third fight.
It's a third
fight. Wow, that's a tough fight.
That was a tough fight, and I kind of, and this is like I look back and kind of a theme in my career of making poor strategic decisions, and instead of kind of continuing, what was winning me these fights in the first two, I decided not to strike him on the ground. I kind of wanted to beat him at his own game, kind of thing, and that's hard to do because he's a good striker, and he was definitely winning the fight on the feet. And my best strategy would have been to once I got him down, put a whooping on him. But I kind of got away from that. That's something I did in the first fight with Cooney. The second fight, I was doing that, I think, a little bit with Shibuya, but I think I got him in a knee bar or something. So I got he had to grab the ropes, and I think that was really what won that match. But then in this fight with Kondo, I just kind of lost my focus, lost the script a little bit, and he got a decision.
Well, let me ask you: was Ken with you on that one? Did you go with Ken?
No, Ken wasn't there. It was it was Guy, Frank, Jason, I believe.
Okay.
Jason was there. I thought I saw Trey too, but I wasn't sure.
I don't think so, but there's a good chance that he was probably also there.
Okay.
Now, I mean, I know. Did you have the thought, like, I felt like the Japanese, in a way, they almost kind of looked down on, like, getting a guy and kind of grabbing him, patting him. In a way, it was more, they wanted more of the technique. Did that play in your head at all? Is that maybe why you did it then, or not really?
You kind of hit it on the head there. I felt that was kind of the way that the sport was for the most part. They did look down on kind of the ground and pound kind of tactic, and so I think that kind of did play into this. Like, I want to win this, under these rules,
Yeah.
But you look back and you look at guys like Boss Rutan and whatever, and they never abided by that shit. You know what I mean? And and it was
it's a setup to make you follow those rules.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was obviously to to their advantage, I think, to not do that. But I do think that was a major player in kind of the psychology of what I was kind of doing there.
Now,
I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead, Pete. I'm sorry.
No, it's Chris. Chris, go ahead.
I was saying, I remember same thing like you're saying. When I was going there early, I was a young kid, and so, I mean, I was going with like Phyllis and Jason, but I mean, like, I was trying to, I don't know, would make a good impression on them, I should say. So I tried to abide by those rules, which probably cost me a couple of fights.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that, or was you guys coming to the lines and we're like, we're going to run this? Are we trying to still abide? Did you have that same, almost like a young guy mentality? Like, I'm trying to just be liked by these guys, or trying to make them want me to come back and all that stuff, or was that not really the case?
Well, I don't think it was so much of a. It wasn't going to come back. I felt, I was on the Lions Den. Ken was kind of the guy supplying a lot of the American fighters. So
okay.
I felt if I had a good performance, I would come back. I think it was, I don't know, just some idea of like a respect thing, or like, earning,
okay.
like doing this and doing it under these rules and still kind of coming out on top. So it was which, as in the fight game, you don't add any extra rules you don't need to. Go out there and win the fight.
Yeah.
So in our interviews with Scott Basak, DeLucia, Galindo, even Vernon White, everybody, all of them, the theme was, it seemed, well, Basak wasn't there when Galindo was. It seemed as if Ken really focused on Vernon and Galindo whenever kind of things got a little bit crazy. Like, he always kind of held them to task, but none of them mentioned your name. Like, whenever Ken had issues outside of the ring and he would take it out on somebody, were you ever on the receiving end of Ken's issues?
No, not really. But I think, Ken, we didn't have that relationship. Like, I wasn't, doing any of his real kind of dirty work, or, in any of his business, so I was kind of outside of that little, sphere of danger. you know, so I didn't really have to deal with the same stuff that they did.
Now, let me take you back to Tokyo and this Pancrase Neo Blood tournament. I mean, at the end of the day, Yuki Kondo was going to be Pancrase's poster boy probably for the next decade, you know? Did you feel a little bit of it was Lions Den versus, you know, the Pancrase way or you know, what you know, did you feel any way they slanted it for him and not for you? Because you know, they have a tendency to do that.
Yeah, of course. You know, it's Japan. You know, if you look in the people who fought on that card, you know, I probably had the toughest road to the final. You know, he did beat Semmy, but you know, Semmy was a kickboxer, and you know, I think he was still kind of young in his career, and he definitely didn't have the grappling, and it was already kind of proven if you can get a guy like that, you know, on the ground. You know,
well,
the danger.
I will even interject by saying Semmy, although from a traditional martial art background, kickboxing guy, stand-up dude, he was under the same mindset. No, I need to beat them at their own game. Like, Semmy didn't use the striking in the Kondo fight.
Really?
Not really. Like, if you watch him and Gilbert Yvel in Holland, Semmy comes out all pancrased out. He refuses not to use Pancrase rules in a fight that they weren't required. So it was just, he was kind of in the same mode that you guys both said you were.
Probably. And I think part of that was just kind of maybe almost, you know, put out there to kind of foster that kind of thing.
My running theory, and because I know Crazy Bob Cook, you worked out with him.
Oh, yeah.
For a while, AKA had a lot of issues having athletes get injured prior to their UFC fights. And I kind of took it from whatever he witnessed at the Lions Den, just kind of carried over into AKA, and he was never really able to shake that. What was your experience like training with Crazy Bob Cook?
Well, you know, we gave him his name, you know, Crazy Bob, because, you know, he was, you know, quiet guy, you know, and just real, you know, one of those like quiet guys that, you know, is dangerous, you know, but he was a fucking lumberjack, you know, and he would like be cutting, you know, down trees all day in the mountains, drive down over an hour. I forget. It was some ridiculous hour and a half or something to come train with us and then go back and then go, you know, do logging again the next day. So, you know, that was kind of one of the big reasons we called him Crazy Bob, because, you know, who the fuck does that? You know, at the end of a day of something like that, you come and go do MMA for 2 hours and go home.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen at home, if you've got Fight Pass, on October 11th, 1996, Super Bowl II, Pete Williams' second MMA outing is in Hawaii, and it's another four-man tournament. So you're all in. Could you tell us about your first opponent, Donald Yobo de la Cruz?
Yeah, he was a, you know, pretty massive dude. He was like 400 something pounds.
Wait. You guys got to see this. Pete is like 198 pounds. He looks like a stick figure. This dude he's listed at 412. They're lying. They are lying. This dude looks like he's built like Grimace from McDonald's, except he's like a tough Hawaiian.
Right. And he was, you know, really overweight, but I mean, he was muscular.
He could move.
His legs were solid, you know, and he was built like an Islander, you know, he was sturdy.
Yeah, bottom heavy.
You know? Yeah. And, you know, so, you know, I wasn't too intimidated. I knew that, you know, hey, I just need to get this guy, if, you know, just don't let him get on top of me. It was my game plan. You know, I can probably outstrike him if we're on the ground. I just don't want to be on the bottom. And, you know, that was kind of strategy I was taking into the fight.
I sent a picture to Galindo, and I'm like, WTF is this? And he's like, oh, dude. Oh, yeah, dude, that's Hawaii. Yeah, he knew exactly of it. And you wind up in the finals against the ghetto blaster, Joe Charles.
The ghetto man.
The ghetto man.
Yes, ghetto man. Which I think he had just switched from no rules, or maybe he went from ghetto man to no rules. I forget. But Joe Charles, he was definitely trying to play the mind games, before the match, when we were warming up in the ring before the event. It was, I forget what he was saying. He was mentioning something. He was like, something about throwing somebody out of the ring. What would happen? If you got thrown out of the ring, land on the floor. I just, nothing like overt, but just this kind of head game.
Say ghetto man things. That's what he was doing.
But well, the funny thing is, going into that fight, just to go back to the De La Cruz fight, I'm kind of sticking and moving, trying to hit this guy, throwing some leg kicks. I was landing the leg kick, so I'll go to throw this next leg kick, and I try and put some little bit of heat on it, and he checks it. He lifts his leg and check it, and I swear I totally thought I broke my ankle because I kicked him right straight on the front of the knee, and I just felt my ankle slinky out around his leg. And you just like felt all the bones in my ankle, separate. And I go and I put it back down, and I'm thinking, well, shit, I'm still standing. It doesn't hurt that much. But so I just kept going in the fight. End up winning the fight. I go backstage and I tell Jerry, I'm like, Jerry, I broke my ankle. I don't know. He's like, well, let me take a look at it. He's like, it's probably fine. He's trying to keep me in the game. So he goes to take off, have those little neoprene sleeves, and he goes to take it off, and my ankle makes the most disgusting sound. It was just like, just gravel. And you could see kind of the look of horror on his face. He's thinking, he's like, oh, fuck. He's like, hold on. I'm going to go talk to Ken. He tells me later, he runs out there. He's like, Ken, I think Pete broke his ankle. And Ken's like, don't tell him that. Tell him he's fine. Tape that up. And, get him ready for the next fight. Which we do. So I tape up my ankle and I go out and fight Joe Charles. And, keeping the head in the game.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, though, because that's a very interesting exchange there. And, we always know Ken's real tough on his guys. But, you were injured, you went in, you won, you gutted it out the next match. Now, did Ken ever express, that he was proud of you? Or, was there any, positive reinforcement coming from this? Because it's a great experience for you.
Yeah, nothing directly. I don't think nothing like mentioning, oh, you fought through the injury or anything, but you could tell he was happy. His guys won that night. We got the belt, and we went out, went out drinking, and I went out all night, on this fucking bum ankle, which, dude, the next day after flying home, and I remember riding in the car, my ankle looked like a fucking volleyball.
Man.
But hit that big meaty knee of his.
Yeah. Hey, did you feel like you had it not added pressure is the right word, but you were Lions Den, man. You had something to uphold. You guys knew you were better than everybody, and you had to go out and prove it every time. Did you feel any extra pressure from that, or was it just kind of a confidence?
Oh yeah, both. I think they both kind of feed off each other. You're like, hey, we're fucking Lions Den, Ken Shamrock and we train hard. We know we train hard. We train harder than most people because people come and train with us and they don't want to fucking, they don't want to stay, and that was Ken's mentality, it was like, you're going to train, you're going to be happy that it's fight day because training is over, and you're going to go through anything and everything you could possibly imagine before you get in there, because you don't want to be surprised. You don't want to be in there and go, oh man, I'm in a situation I've never been in before. I'm hurt. I'm whatever. And, what do I do? No, he wanted you to go in there like, yeah, this is just another day in training, and to prepare me for that first tournament, because it was the first MMA tournament, there was some rough fucking training. I remember one day he came in after fucking training is just wrapping up, and I'm exhausted. We worked out hard. He's like, Pete, put on the gloves, and come over here. And when he says that, you're just like, oh, fuck. Jesus Christ, So he's like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna mount you, and we're gonna do 5-minute rounds of you escaping, and I'm gonna be striking you. Awesome. And this is after training. I'm already exhausted, and then I got Ken's fucking.
Did you try to negotiate? Did you try to meet halfway?
No negotiation. That would be a bad. If you tried to talk your way out of it, that would only worsen things.
Hey, Pete, let me ask you a question. How many times did he say, all right, you mount me and let me see how I escape?
Yeah, no, that never happened. That was not part of the training.
Yeah, I thought that was your answer.
But I swear to God, we went like 6 rounds at least, 5-minute rounds.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was not. There was nothing like halfway. It was always this, fucking, trial, going through this trial by fire.
You know what though? Old school mentality like that, I think is great, because I guarantee you, whenever in a fight, we thought, I've never been this tired, I'm not in this position. You were used to it. You know what I mean? So, I mean, in my opinion, back then, you guys were definitely the best training center in the country. I don't know about in the world. I don't know. Hard to say in Brazil, but you guys were. To me, when I first started fighting, you guys that was what I thought of. I started in 98. So
I feel, we were, and the Pancrase style, what we were bringing to MMA was what MMA became. We called it submission fighting, where ours was a, position dominant type of wrestling. We could wrestle from the bottom, but, who wants to just give up their back, go on their back? Yeah. We were like, wrestle from the top, pressure, strike, look for a submission, but, you don't want to be kind of the guy sitting back and letting someone attack you. You were just on the offensive. And, this is kind of what, modern jiu-jitsu now is. There's no gi. They call it no gi now, which we, obviously never used. And it's, it's fighting from the top, strike, and look for submissions. So at the time, I felt we were, leading, kind of
the country's bad boys, man. Yeah.
What's that?
Yes, we're the bad boys of the entire country.
Yeah. Yeah, we were. We were riding high there for a couple of years, and we're relevant for quite a few. Unfortunately, there, Ken and we weren't like the business savvy as say the Gracies and other people, and so that that legacy didn't really carry over as much as maybe it could have, or I'd have liked to have seen.
Well, Pete, I mean, you guys were a fighter gym, and I've always tell people fighter gyms don't make money, man. I mean, the Gracies, their whole idea was to, turn this into, Taekwondo and put a jiu-jitsu center in every city, and they did that. You guys were pure fighters. They weren't pure fighters.
Yeah, and it but ultimately, I don't know. Even though it's a sport, it's a business, and you can have a lot of success or whatnot, or maybe you have a great style, but if you can't market that, and if you can't get other people to follow in that, it's there's just a shelf life.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Let me ask you about Mikey Burnett too, because this is this is a guy that right around this time came in kind of like when you and Jerry kind of became real good friends. Like Guy was like, maybe consider Vernon and Ken's generation, but Mikey fit right in with you guys. Well, why don't you talk about like meeting him and how he came aboard? Because he was in the Tulsa Lions then, and that's also when Ken was looking like, like the business is going good. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, well, Mikey came in, still while we were in Lodi, and there was no, Lions Den Tulsa. I don't even know if even there was ever a Lions Den Dallas. It was always Guy Mezger's mixed martial arts, but they were kind of like our Ken's affiliate. Yeah, and so Mikey came a few months after me. I honestly can't remember. Maybe even 6 months. I don't. Okay. I can't remember exactly, but he was another guy in the tryout, and we, we were talking because he came in, and he was one of those guys who was really cocky. He had some fights under his belt, and he's like, he just had that attitude, and so me and Jerry were like, oh yeah, we gotta kick this guy's ass, and we put him through the tryouts. He and obviously he made it. He did well, and but we put it on him. We made sure that he wasn't just going to walk into this thing, and he passed the test. And he was a savage. He's a small guy, 165, 175 pounds. And he's going with all of us who are all 200 plus pound guys at the time. And he would hang. I mean, he had it was tough, and there was days where it was just like, fuck, I got to go with Pete. The guy outweighs me by 50, 60 pounds. But he he would he would put a whipping on you, and especially wrestling, takedowns and all that. Man, the guy would just, it didn't matter. He would, slam you. It was, it was a good addition, to.
Yeah, he had good wrestling and very good boxing as well.
And his boxing came more on later when he went back to Oklahoma.
Okay.
He did have a good right hand. He could punch, but his skill really developed, later on. Okay,
I didn't know him till later, so I just knew what I knew. I thought he had good boxing, but that was I didn't meet him until 2006. So.
Yeah, well, and he got that way because I think he was a good natural puncher, and really worked with some, he kind of took to it, devoted a lot of his training to it, and really kind of got.
We've actually reached out to him a couple times. He's just not interested in doing interviews, unfortunately. But like another person in 1999 that tried out, that was a smaller guy that certainly, at least on paper, appears to would have fit in, was Jens Pulver. Do you remember Jens Pulver's tryout?
Maybe vaguely, because in '99 I was still in Dallas. I moved back to San Diego around in 2000, I think. But I did make it out there a couple times. I remember, I do remember a tryout, but I don't remember all the guys who were in there.
So Chris, essentially, Lytle or Jens Pulver passes everything, and then at the end they just tell him, "Hey, we got nobody your size, man. Sorry, you can't be on the team."
Really? Damn.
Yeah, and that might have been like a Ken, thing. I really am not sure what
Well, it was before they even had a close weight class, too. I mean, let's kind of call it what
170 was the lightest weight class back then. They're probably like, what are we going to do with this guy? He can't make one. I mean, he's not a 170 pounder, you know?
That was in that 170,
200 and heavyweight.
In like the way their practices were set up at the Lions Den, like Mikey Burnett was fighting heavyweights, you know? Like,
yeah.
And I think, Mikey was like a rare, small guy who could make it because he was a big small guy. The guy, he was jacked and he could, he had that power. He could, he could toss you. He could hang in there. So I think that was kind of the one exception, of the small guy who was in there. But like you said, back then the sport there really weren't weight classes. They were just entering some weight classes around that time, and it was still bigger was better.
It's incredible just to watch the progression of the sport. And even at times like, 145, who wants the 145-pound weight class? Or when they eliminated the 55-pound weight class, who cares? Meanwhile, like 45, 55, 70, in my opinion, those are the most exciting weight classes in the sport, like in boxing.
Yeah.
Outside of the heavyweights.
Yeah, you really get to see, the great technique. You don't have the heavyweights are great, for power, and you can see some, you watch the fireworks, but with the smaller guys, and you just start seeing all this acrobatic shit, just really exciting
athletes.
Athletes and techniques that you're not going to see the high, the heavier you go.
Okay. So on January 17th, 1997, you return to Hawaii, Super Brawl 3. Super Brawl seems to be kind of like the Lions' Den home stadium. Do you get that feel as well? They bring a lot of...
I mean, that was kind of one of the, bigger, organizations, at the time. And I don't know, maybe it was in Hawaii also, it was a trip.
And there's no rules. It's like headbutts, no gloves, head stomps, pride rules.
No board.
Yeah. So you fight John Renfro, who took the fight on 1 week notice. And you're another 4-man tournament, I might add.
Yeah. Yeah, and I knew him. He's a Pancrase guy. He had come down and trained with us before and was a tough guy. Was another guy who, kind of, tried to get in your head a little bit. But, when he had come down and trained with us, that was a much earlier time. I had gone through many more months of training. So, whereas when we trained together initially, it was pretty close, but, I had gone through a lot of shit since then. And I was just able to, finish him pretty quickly on that.
So Doug Murphy is supposed to meet you in the finals, and he's injured, even though his fight was real quick. Well, that's not true. He had a little rough go, but he opted not to fight in the finals. They give you the belt. Did they give you your tournament win money or just your show money for the first fight?
No, I believe I got the win money. Although, I was kind of disappointed because I think that he was a Matt Hume guy, and I believe before that fight he was kind of talking some trash, kind of hyping it up, and so it was a little bit disappointing that he didn't make it to the finals. But and I guess I don't know what the deal was. There was no alternates. Like I think the other guy who he fought was maybe the alternate, and they both decided not to take the fight.
At this point, are you thinking, I'd like to go back to Japan, I'd like to fight in the UFC? I mean, what's your goal at this point?
Honestly, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where I was just kind of along for the ride a little bit, I mean, I was kind of seeing, where Ken was going to put me, whether it was Pancrase or stepping up to the UFC. just focus on training and winning fights.
Just at this point in your career, now you've done Pancrase, and you've already dealt with the technical aspects of trying to impress the Japanese. Now it's Super Brawl. You're talking full out headbutts and stuff. Which did you like better? What did you want to do?
I did like the Pancrase and UFC. The headbutts, I wasn't as into them. I just think it's kind of it's just a little bit of an ugly technique, and I say that winning like that first fight in there with some headbutts as part of the thing, but I was not planning on using headbutts in that fight, but Yobo was like, I was mounting on him. I was throwing some punches, some elbows, and he started like scratching, my face, and he actually got his fingernails in my mouth and under my tongue, cut my mouth. So I think he was pulling down on he grabbed like my lower jaw, and he kind of cut under my tongue, and this was after he had scratched me a little bit, and I was like, all right, you want to pull my head down? And that was the first headbutt. It was just like, here it goes, boom, and opened a big cut on him, and I just threw a few more, and so I mean, for me, headbutts are, I mean, if we're talking like true, no holds barred, yes, headbutts are part of it, but if we're talking about sport and fighter safety and whatnot, that starts getting on the extreme end of really what should be allowed.
They're a little crass.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just
uncivilized, some would say.
Very cavemanish, yeah.
Caveman, there you go.
So at this point in MMA, at this exact point, Ken Shamrock's calling out Tank Abbott.
Yeah.
Whatever happened with that?
There's a lot of fights that just don't happen for one reason or another. Better fights become available, more money, injuries, blah blah blah. And I really don't know what happened with that. They were going to have me fight Tank at one point, but again, that didn't happen.
At UFC 13, did Hammer House protect Tito Ortiz from you guys from the Lions Den?
At UFC, which UFC was this?
UFC 13. Backstage, the Lions Den was about to pounce on Tito, and Hammer House kind of got in between everybody.
Which fight was that? Like, who did fight? Who fought on that card?
Man, we get these nerds like us leaving comments in our like YouTube feed, and PDY actually left that. And I mean that with respect, because all of us are here for being dorks.
Guy fought Tito.
That's the Mezger Ortiz main event. That's the rematch.
The rematch?
Yeah.
The rematch?
Yeah.
Yeah, when Tito pulled out that shirt after he beat guy.
Hey, Mezger.
No, I mean, if we were gonna jump him, would have probably been in there in the ring. I don't remember us trying to go and fight him after that.
It would have been a Daggy Stanny type beatdown, is what you're saying.
Well, I do apologize. I'm sorry. It's not the rematch. This is Tito's debut.
Okay.
Debut.
Well, Tito lost that one. Guy beat him.
Yeah, Tito lost that one. Even less of a reason. I mean, I wasn't there for that. It was I forget maybe who was there, but why would we be trying to? The guys be trying to come after the guy just made him tap.
Committed him.
I could see how someone would think that on the second one, because we lost that one, but even then.
And then Ken kind of get into it in the ring right there. Ken's pointing in his face after the rematch, I believe.
Yeah. No, we were all, kind of pissed. And it sucks because I was helping Guy train for that. We were training up in Oklahoma a little bit too. And this is like one of the things with the Lions Den where it's like you never pull out of a fight and this and that. But, Guy was like, horribly sick the whole week before, 103 fever. And he was feeling better by the time of the fight, obviously wasn't running that high of a temp, but he was just not in prime condition. But there was no, I don't know, there was a lot of ego and no pulling out of the fight. So, you just saw him just flat run out of gas. He had nothing after the first, however long it was, 5-10 minutes. And, just, seeing Tito do his thing and just like, yeah, fuck this guy,
You guys were all California guys. Tito ran with Tank initially. And I have to assume, mixed martial arts at the time was a very small community. Do you remember why Tito and Tank had their falling out?
I don't. I wasn't part of that. Obviously that circle, we were pretty much on opposite sides. So yeah, there was really no information sharing there,
Okay, fair enough.
I wanted to ask you because we're at UFC 13. I just checked it, and the main event was Belfort and Tank, and you saw Belfort also in Hawaii. So what was your first impressions of him? Because that's somebody that probably Ken would have said, get ready for that guy to you, or what was the buzz around him?
There was nothing really directly like concerning me. He wanted Frank to fight him, which they did in Hawaii on the second time around, I think. Because the first time around, I forget who he fought, but he just kind of cleaned him out, with his blitz, his punch blitz, and then Frank fought him the next time, and we thought Frank won that. It was a tough fight. These guys were really kind of taking it to each other, but they gave it to Vitor. And I don't know. There was never talk of me fighting Vitor or past really didn't get that close to each other.
What about Oleg Tektarov? Were you ever present for the Ken Shamrock Oleg Tektarov sparring sessions?
Oh yeah, I trained with Oleg. I don't, not so much with, he was there before I was, so I think a lot of their initial sparring sessions, I was just not around for. But I trained with Oleg, and the guy's got one of the nastiest Achilles locks there is. Like, if anyone, you get conditioned to resist that submission because for the most part it's just pain. Unless someone really gets it low, they could hurt your ankle. They could definitely pop your ankle, but for the most part it's just kind of pressure on the Achilles. But I swear his, it felt like he was going to like rupture your freaking tibia or something, it was no joke. But no, I was not present actually for
did you hear a rumor that he locked himself in the bathroom after fighting Ken and cried?
That's a rumor. I could maybe see Oleg, doing that because Oleg was a very, he's this tough Russian guy, but he's also, he was kind of had this, soft side. I don't want to say soft, like weak, but just, he was a good guy. He was a cool guy, and I could see him taking.
He's in touch with his emotions.
Yeah, I can see him taking that a lot hard, But again, that's, that's just I've just heard this now.
Okay. Did you ever submit Ken Shamrock when rolling with him?
Technically, yes, but you don't want to submit Ken Shamrock because then you're gonna have to deal with a fucking, pissed off Ken Shamrock. So, a lot of times it's just like you have to, let things go so that it doesn't turn into a fucking, full on fight on
Civil War.
Yeah, it's like, do I really want to, do I really want this submission, or do I want to just not, get into a full on scrap right now? Because he has to get you back. He would have to get you back, and not just the same. Like 10 times worse. So it's not in your best interest necessarily to, finish a submission.
Now, you mentioned Frank and all the people in the Lions, and at some point, Frank gravitated and became influenced by Maurice Smith, who was also starting to be in the UFC around this time. What was your first meeting with Maurice?
Maurice came down when we were in Lodi, and was training with us. Was showing us obviously some kickboxing and Thai techniques, which we needed. We were all a bunch of wrestlers down there, so we would train him on how to wrestle and how to do submissions, and he would train us with kickboxing. So it was a good partnership. He was the first guy who really kind of got my kicks, with some kind of technique. And so, he, I really, give him a lot of credit for helping me in that area, in the early days.
Were you close to Frank at all?
Yeah, I think we were all pretty close to each other, for that first year. We lived in the same house. We were around each other 24 hours a day, basically, for a good year. So, you get to know guys.
Okay. All right, so you go back to Japan after Hawaii. You beat Jupe Castillo out of the Dolman Gym in Hawaii, or in Holland, famous gym. At that point, Guy Mezger starts throwing World Pancrase Championships. You fight Scott Mullen. And then, in about a week's notice, you get called up against Mark Coleman at UFC 17 in the main event. Your UFC debut. You might take us through the process of how you got the fight, the conversations that took place in regards to it.
Yeah, well, I was already training. I was in Dallas at the time because the Lions Den in Lodi had closed down. Ken went to the WWF at the time. And so that gym closed, and I needed a place to train. So I was in Dallas with Guy and Trey and Alex Andrade. And at the time, I was actually training for Dan Severn. I was scheduled to fight Dan Severn, who, luckily was, was a very similar kind of fight. So I was already training to fight kind of a big wrestler. And, I get this call from Jerry, and he's like, Pete, he's like, we got a fight for you. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, it's a bigger fight. It's a better fight. I'm like, bigger fight? Like, already Dan Severn, it was like, damn, this guy's already experienced guy, probably the toughest guy I was going to fight up to that point. He's like, no, way bigger. I'm like, well, who the fuck is way bigger than Dan Severn? He's like, Mark Coleman. And I'm like, what? I'm thinking, okay, you're just going to throw Mark Coleman out there, huh? And I asked him, I was like, I don't know, man. You think this is good for me to take this? You think? He's like, and Jerry's always like the optimist. He's like, fuck yeah, you're gonna kill this guy, And so I'm like, okay, well, fuck it, let's do it. Let's do this. And yeah, it was literally like a week out, maybe at most 2 weeks out. And I agreed to the fight. And definitely, the last week of training, because we would normally take a light week before the fight, not go super heavy, just kind of stay sharp. But I had a good week there of a little bit extra motivation in my training.
Now, I believe I mean, Mark had just been killing everybody, and then I hadn't had Maurice just kind of beat him before that, so that kind of give you like the blueprint. Hey, this is all I got to do. You know, if he gets taking me down, it's kind of weather the storm and then kick him in the face.
No, 100%. You know, we helped Maurice train for that. You know, that was part of our kind of thing. You know, he came down to help to prepare for that, and we, you know, gave him some tools to survive on the ground. The one thing that he didn't have, and he never had in his career, is he just had no takedown defense. Just terrible takedown defense. And so he was very hesitant to let go with his striking because, you know, as you know, you start punching, kicking, and you leave yourself open for that takedown. So that little bit of a hole in his game didn't allow him to use his excellent kickboxing. But that's where, you know, I had a lot more experience, a lot more, you know, skill and comfort in the wrestling. And, you know, I felt, you know, hey, you know, I'm not going to win this on the ground, right? I need to keep this standing, and I need to just, you know, keep peppering this guy and win this fight on the feet, and just do whatever I can to keep this on the feet.
Now, Pete, I gotta ask you. You know, obviously you sound like a very nice guy, and you mentioned that headbutts are crass. You know, kicking a man in the face with shoes could be considered crass too. You know.
Well, they were wrestling shoes. You could call it. You could even say that they were padding, a little extra padding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll call that a social faux pas. Mm-hmm. That's what we refer to.
I wonder if Mark would call them padding.
Yeah, well, we had Coleman on, and Coleman's a madman. Like, he's legitimately a friend of all of ours. Yeah. And we can't get him back on the show. And when we had him on, we talked about this fight, and he was talking about a lot of fence grabbing, one-side calls with fence grabbing with Big John McCarthy. The question is, do you think Big John McCarthy and the UFC brass did not like Mark Coleman at that time? Behind the scenes, never mind in the game.
No clue whatsoever on that. But I will tell you this. At that time, just like wearing shoes was legal, fence grabbing was legal.
Well,
so there was
that's where it gets funny, because Big John would scream at Coleman that he was taking a point next time Coleman grabs the fence. And meanwhile, he looks like he's like playing a slingshot with you as like the rubber band while you're grabbing the fence.
I don't remember him grabbing the fence at all in our fight, though. Because he was just kind of mounted on me, trying to do some ground and pound. I really don't remember any warning fence grabbing.
You definitely didn't get any. Coleman.
No. Do you remember this? I mean, is this visible in the fight? Or?
Pete, no, Pete. I'm going to be. All right, so Coleman's my friend. Anybody
Mike rewatches these fights a lot.
Yeah, dude, I'm a friggin' dork, bro. And like, I look at. Here is the issue. Here's the big issue. I use today's glasses, and then I look at yesterday's fights. Like, you can't do that, but I do. I mean, to make the argument against myself. I got problems, Pete. My wife right now, it's amazing. We're still together. If you look at the UFC Fight Pass and you look at kind of like hours watched, outside of a bar, I got to be top 3. Like, you subtract bars and restaurants, like they know who I am. So,
we need to solve this mystery, because what I remember is fence grabbing was still legal, because that was kind of part of my strategy. I was going to use whatever to not be taken down. They had just made headbutting illegal, so you could maybe say that they did that against Mark.
That's part of my argument of why the UFC wanted Coleman out of the organization. And he wasn't a real friendly guy outside the cage.
Was he?
No, my God, dude. Kevin Randleman used to call Bob Meyrowitz's secretary and threaten her life just for fun. Just like, hey guys, watch this. Like they were so scared of Hammer House. Like they couldn't understand. Like Kevin would do it as a way of, I really care about you, so I'm going to threaten your life, like in a very angry manner, but it's because I love you. And they would be like, well, I'm from New York. I'm kind of upper crust, and I'm not used to dealing with this type of attitude. And I'm afraid.
That probably wasn't the best for their business, to try and get thrown out of the UFC. Probably was not smart for them.
No.
Well, Pete, like, are you getting the feeling? One of the vibes here, Mark and Ken are a lot alike. They're unbelievable, athletes, the highest level at this sport in their day, total alpha guys, but they do come with a little baggage, and it does seem like the UFC, didn't pick them kind of thing. Do you feel like they never, like Ken was always adversarial with the UFC? Because I think that plays into it.
Well, I don't know. I think with Ken, Ken is definitely trying to push the limits of negotiations and maybe, that was kind of his thing where it was stepping over the line of how much is going to get paid and maybe, some other things. With Mark, I wasn't part of that group, so I really don't know his relationship with the organization. So that I couldn't really comment on.
So Pete, at that time, you knew what you did was stratospheric. Like, you came in as a heavy underdog. You got a former world champion as your UFC debut, short notice. If there were odds at that time, they would be astronomically slanted against you.
Of course.
After that fight, like after a couple of days settling in, did you have a feeling that based on your performance that night, you'd be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame?
No, I mean, because back then there was, they were just trying to shut us down. We fought that fight in Birmingham, Alabama. So, seeing that far into the future wasn't part of my thought process. I was just riding high on the fact that my team believed in me. We were pushing each other to be the best we could be, and that culminated in a successful win that fight. I knew I had the cardio. I knew I could implement this strategy, wear Mark out, and use the striking that I had, which was going to be able to come into play when he was tired, when it was going to be much harder to take me down, and it worked. It worked well. It worked better than I could have imagined. I was going into that final, overtime, basically understanding that it's either knockout or you lose, So
and that has to be great to see, like one of the all-time great, highlights, I guess, is that kick. You know what I mean? That's got to be make you feel good every time you see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for 10 years.
Oh, it was definitely, riding high after that. But I will say this. I know Mark has his version of events and everything, but for me, again, I'm gonna always kind of give. I'm never one to just be like, oh no, fuck this shit. If fence grabbing was illegal, it was never mentioned because it's not my style to use illegal tactics.
Break the rules, for sure.
For sure.
And Chris, let me kind of highlight that. if you listen to our Tony Galindo interview and understand everything that Tony was involved with Ken, and Pete was kind of last pick on all of those shenanigans, it just tells you a big difference of character between those two.
Yeah, I mean, Tony was definitely a showman, and he was gonna,
nuts.
He's always pushing the limits of yes, and being nuts. That was never, I don't know, that was never my.
That was never your thing, right?
Well,
so, go ahead, Miko.
I was just gonna say, I think Petey, yourself, Jerry, Burnett, they, Ken, and the Lions. Then at that point, that was as legit as it got, really. After that, even with Galindo, Galindo's obviously a real fighter and everything, but his career didn't get as far. You guys had Vern. That first generation was your best generation. And so, at that point, you guys were carrying the flag and all that stuff. But, how did that feel when you got back to the Lions then? Like, how much did you get paid for Coleman, too?
Oh, fuck, like 9,000, I think.
Oh!
Like 2 to show and 7 to win, 7.5 to win.
And they weren't counting on that. They're like, damn, we thought we were giving it to
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was nothing,
Now, Pete, I mean, I feel you have to feel just a complete sense of just, not anger is the right word, but like, man, I mean, I helped build this organization and I got paid peanuts, and I mean.
Grand to fight Coleman.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that's got to be frustrating. I mean, I felt the same thing with looking at the people now, but I mean, you had to feel. I mean, but I looked at people like you guys. I was like, well, man, I got, they got peanuts compared to me. It's all relative, I guess. But that just has to be not infuriating is the right word, but it's like, man, I helped build this, and I didn't really get paid much for it. It's kind of got to be frustrating.
Well, and back then it was just kind of, it was what it was. Again, it's kind of the future of the sport was not for sure by any means, and those were kind of the paydays there. What's kind of sucks is to see that the paydays really haven't advanced all that much to the modern day, even though the sport is on ESPN. It's got it was sold for $4 billion. These guys should be making money like these other pro athletes of their stature.
Pete, and not to get sidetracked, you've got like the mid-level, mid-card UFC guys that get career-ending injuries in camp, and they can't afford insurance, so they have to go take a loss in the UFC in order to get the surgery, just so that they can live a normal life.
Yeah,
and like you even saw with like TJ Dillashaw recently, like. I couldn't afford to take another year off. I had to go in here and get my shoulder separated again and, last less than a round. So, but that's another time. That's another time.
It is, and, that's kind of what we had to do. There was no insurance. It was, you had
Minard, James Krause isn't fixing fights. The guy had to, maybe Minard had something to do with it, but Krause didn't.
Minard had nothing to do with that. I guarantee it, man.
But then that's it. So he had to go get knee surgery. That's it. That's why.
Plus, I mean, if you're 1-3 in the UFC and they say, "Hey, you got to fight," you tell them, "No, you'll never fight again." You have to. Fight. I mean, it's just a bad situation.
It's a bad situation for everybody. You're right. So right at this time of the Lions down, it's very interesting. Ken's in WWE. Frank is going, screw this, I'm out of here. He leaves with Maurice Smith, Crazy Bob Cook, Eric Del Fiero, and your next opponent, TK.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the type of – John Peretti was matchmaking at this time. Am I correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so you got John Peretti going. Lions then split up. Let's throw TK against, Pete Williams, create some drama. How was that received? Was this requested or was this a Peretti type setup?
I don't know how that was set up or who set that up. It's kind of weird. I trained with TK again in Lodi before that, and I was not part of this matchmaking situation. So it was just for me. It was another fight.
Okay, real quick. So at this point, Ken is out doing WWF stuff. Is he not guiding, directing anymore? Is he totally out of fight business? Are you guys just running your own career? How's that going?
No, we were, training ourselves. We all kind of went our different ways. I went to Dallas. Mikey went to Oklahoma. Jerry was training in California.
Okay.
But Ken was still, I think, doing kind of the managing type, setting up the fights, stuff like that with him and Bob, I think.
Let's talk about the split. Like with Maurice Smith and company leaving with Frank and you guys staying, did they try to talk to anybody else over there? Like, were you ever approached about leaving to form the alliance with Frank Shamrock?
No, Frank just went on his own.
Okay. I hope you really know the answer to this question. There seems to have been almost a tug of war over Jerry Bohlander with Ken and Frank. Like, for instance, Frank would always insist that the announcers would say, managed by Ken Shamrock, but trained by Frank Shamrock. Did you kind of notice just a little tug of war between Ken and Frank over Jerry?
I don't think so, because again, like when Frank left, he just kind of bailed on all of us. It wasn't like he split with Ken, and he didn't try and take anyone from the team. They always had their kind of conflict, which kind of came to a head after that Rings event, where I won that fight, but it was like a poor performance, and Ken didn't like that, and so he kind of flipped out, at Frank, because the fighters weren't prepared, and he kind of looked like shit. I fought like shit. And he threw this computer monitor and just really kind of went off on Frank. And I think that was kind of like the final breaking point where Frank was just like, yeah, fuck this shit. I'm gonna do my own thing. I don't have to put up with this shit.
But now, Pete, when you fought Kohsaka, that was in Brazil, and at this point the split's taking effect. And Frank's the main event. Frank is there with Maurice. They're the big deal. Did you feel like a little left out in the cold?
No, not so much. I felt it was kind of a thing with between Ken and Frank. So it wasn't really my thing, but it was a little bit strange. It was a little bit of a shakeup just because Frank left, Ken left the WWF, and so I just kind of had to find my place, and I was able to do that in Dallas, with the guys there, which was I was happy there. It was a good move.
Now, when you would show up there, if you would see Frank, was it awkward, or were you guys still like friendly? Everything pretty cool? Like, hey man, how you doing? Was it because of the split? Was it weird or not really?
Maybe a little weird. I mean, Frank was always kind of just on his own thing. So it's not like we were ever really tight friends or anything. So it was cordial, but it was just kind of like, hey, what's up? Kind of thing.
Hey, Pete, who cornered you in Brazil? Because I don't remember a guy there.
Bohlander wasn't.
Was it Trey?
I don't remember.
Trey Telligman was in your corner.
Was it Trey?
Yeah.
It might have been Trey because I trained in Dallas.
Yeah, I know.
I think it was Mikey Burnett too. I'm going for
it. Might have been
maybe it was Mikey Burnett to Trey.
Mikey, yeah. Could have been Alex too.
Yeah, Mikey had a fight that day too, obviously. So
yeah,
Mikey's a savage too. I'd love to get him on here. So your former training partner is now your opponent. How did practices go between you two when you guys were in the gym together?
This is good. He's a really cool guy. Definitely a grappling base of his skill set. So I would get the better of him on the feet. I was already kind of developing some stand-up skills, and he had some really good judo, and we were pretty close on the ground. I could still I came from wrestling, so it was a close match. But this was like another one of those situations where they approached us. They approached me with this, hey, if it goes to the ground, let's not strike on the ground. Which if you see in that fight, there's no striking on the ground until the end when it's a close fight. TK was on top of me. He was in my guard, and he kind of looks at me and he kind of gives me this look like almost like sorry man, and just starts throwing some punches, and I'm like, this motherfucker, So it was just another one of those kind of foolish things that really was there was no reason. Okay, yeah, we're friends or what have you, but why? This is a fight. This is business, and that's how it should have been.
Now, Pete, before that training camp, you were talking about Mikey. There's been a strong rumor for years that I don't know, maybe it was the Townsend Saunders fight, or this one was after that where he fought Miletich, that Ken knocked him out in training. Like, were you witness to that? Because supposedly on the week of the week before they left for the trip, Mikey got knocked out. Is that something you can confirm?
For this fight in Brazil?
It was either this one or the Townsend Saunders one, but the rumor persisted that Burnett had been knocked out cold by Ken, and that Ken sent them out to fight anyway. Did you see that? Is that right?
I wasn't there. They were training at a different camp, I think in San Diego. But that is totally plausible. I mean, it's not out of the realm of reason. I probably wasn't there, so I just I can't say for sure, but that I don't know who would know that. Jerry might know that.
We'd really like to get Jerry on here. In fact, I've done all of the research. All he's got to do is show up. But
yeah, well, I mean, maybe he'd want to do an interview, but a lot of us are kind of like out of the limelight, just kind of doing our things, and so I don't know how he feels about that.
No, he's still got a job that at the very least. He's in the public eye, so maybe he wants
police officer, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't need somebody going, "Hey, yeah, you're the big UFC fighter. I saw your interview," either, right? So I bet you he comes on when he's retired. I bet you he comes on.
Yeah, it's known that he's a UFC veteran, but I just Jerry's a pretty private guy. He's not trying to get himself out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pete, I'm sorry. I heard at one point. Go ahead, Keith.
Sorry, Pete. I had heard at one point you were like some kind of a chef or something. Is that true?
In Hawaii.
Yeah. After fighting, I went to culinary school and got into culinary for a few years.
Really?
Moved to Hawaii. Yeah.
That's fantastic, man. Now, one thing, I'll talk to young fighters, and I always start telling them now, you need to have an exit strategy. Don't wait till you're 38 and they force you to retire and you go, what am I going to do now? You need to start planning that while you're fighting. Is that something you think is a good idea for people to like, hey, man, you better figure out if you're going to be a coach, a trainer, a commentator, something. You better figure this out now. Don't wait till your career. Don't keep fighting and get knocked out your last 5 fights. Figure it out now.
Yeah, I think that can help kind of ease the transition, because it's tough, to finally, sit there and call it quits and you can, there's a lot of, it's a difficult time. So if you have something there to kind of keep you occupied and get you, right into something else, that's, I think, gonna really, help that transition. But
was that tough for you? Because I mean, man, that's like the toughest thing for most people. I got lucky and jumped in a couple things right away, but it's still tough.
Yeah, it was tough, because me, and I look back on it now, and it was probably a good thing, but I was kind of, forced to retire really just due to injuries,
Your body. Yep.
Yeah, and really I probably shouldn't have even fought, my last contract with the UFC. I was not healthy and not in the right headspace, and it showed, I think my performances were pretty poor. And yeah, I didn't really have a plan, and it was, it was tough because it was added tough because the injuries I had, which was basically osteoarthritis of the shoulders, really didn't allow me to even really train after. They were really bad, and the muscles were all in this protective state. So I basically had frozen shoulder syndrome, by the time I was 30 years old. And I haven't wrestled since I retired. And I love the wrestling, and I physically cannot wrestle.
That's what was going to be another question. Do you ever do any jiu-jitsu or rolling or anything like you say now you can't do anything like that because of your shoulders?
Yeah. I would do some kickboxing because I could still punch, and that kind of range of motion was still okay, but wrestling, no, cannot.
Wow.
That's so that was a really tough psychologically, really, to just be, to go from this height of ability and just something that you did every day to, you can't do this anymore.
Wow. That's brutal, man.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I deal, obviously have learned to deal with it, and I'm old enough now where I would still love to wrestle. I mean, I would love to not have these injuries because it does suck. It's limiting, but now I have other pursuits, sure, other things to fill that gap.
Chris, he harvests marijuana now.
Smart guy.
Yeah. Well, I help. I started as just kind of working in there as like a lead in the flower department, and I've kind of worked my way up to
how do I get a job like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but in California for one.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you. You're talking about Lodi, California, where you're talking about Lodi. That's the heart of Humboldt County.
No, Lodi is Humboldt's way farther north. Lodi is the heart of BFE. It's the Zinfandel capital of the world. But okay. Right now I'm in Hollister, so near Santa Cruz. But this Central Coast area, there's a lot of cannabis here, all over the state. Honestly, there's a lot of cannabis in California.
So Chris, March 5th, 1999 is UFC 19. Did you corner Jason Gotze when he fought Pete?
I did not.
You weren't there?
I think I was there, but I wasn't one of his cornermen, no.
Okay. So my next question, Chris, is at weigh-ins, when you see all the Lion's Den guys in camouflage and berets, what was your opinion of what was going on?
I'll be honest with you, I didn't get there till the day of the fight, so I didn't see that, but I missed it. That would have been a good one to see. I'd probably been I don't think I'd have been scared. I'd have been I've been
It
laughing.
looked like a dance troupe. It looked like a dance troupe. Pete, what was going on with that?
Just one of Ken's,
Psychological warfare.
Yeah, we always kind of had like kind of a team thing. Before that, there was like some jumpsuits, like some red and yellow.
There we go.
Warm ups.
One day there's going to be TikTok, so we're going to wear berets and camouflage today.
just early at the party.
Yeah.
So, Pete, please take us through the Jason Godsey fight. It's UFC 19, March 5th, 1999.
Yeah, that was I took a small hiatus from the UFC, came back, and I was a little bit nervous for that fight. Just I was back there. I felt I feel like I like to fight when I'm the underdog more so, because there's kind of almost less pressure than you better win this fight kind of thing, which was really always the case. But
yeah.
But there was certain ones where it was more so like you're expected to beat this guy, and but again, you train for this, so you just kind of get into your mode. And I forget exactly how that fight started out. We kind of
Godsey rushed at you.
Did he rush?
Yeah, and then he kind of wound it into a takedown, and
so I just remember getting a takedown, kind of getting on top, in like this kind of weird half guard position, standing half guard. And, I hear Ken just going, do it. So I just swung in for the knee bar and locked that up.
So, Chris, Godsey's got wins at this point over Steve Jenham and Jeremy Horn. What was your game plan and thoughts with him heading into fighting Pete?
Well, we knew from watching, especially the Coleman, he's going to be well-rounded and tough. So didn't really want Jason staying on the outside, worry about those kicks. So that's kind of where the bum rush I remember Jason came forward with some punches, but Jason had a little bit of a disadvantage, I feel like, as far as like he was the biggest guy in our area, going with a lot of lighter guys. So I just don't think he had he's a full-time teacher. I don't think he had the submission skill exactly to kind of go with a high caliber guy that was training at the Lions Den every day. So he probably I remember like when that knee bar came, like he tried to get his own knee bar, but Pete just beat him to it. I can't remember how it went, but it was over pretty fast, about a minute and a half or something. Like,
I think he was kind of going for my leg. I forget what was going, but he was so out of position. I kind of knew at that point. I was like, okay, well, this he doesn't fully know what he's where he's at right now. So I just kind of pit-bulled on the leg and locked it up.
Yeah.
For those of you at home that follow, we go one second. I'll let you in real quick. Bruce Buffer's introduction to this. Oh my God, is it? You gotta watch it. It's
really
horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
From the top.
No. It's like one word at a time. Like he's on a teleprompter, and the prompter's like on pause, and he just can't figure out what to say. It's fantastic. Miguel, go ahead.
Pete, I just want to take a step back because you talked a little bit about rings and how you had a little bit of a poor performance, and Ken kind of let you have it. Now, that Brazil show where Mikey lost, a tough decision, and then you and Kohsaka, fought a lackluster fight. That must have not been fun getting back to Ken, or was Guy the same? How was that return? Because I figure coming off of that you were really motivated for the Godsey fight too.
Yeah, more so. Ken, guys, no, they're not alike in that sense at all. And yeah, that fight was just kind of wasn't as as good as it could have been. I always, for me as a fighter, I was again kind of like in this thing just so randomly, and I always did better when I, had a good training camp, someone leading the training camp, and getting me prepared for a fight. If ever I was just kind of like training myself, which I don't think any fighter really should do, my sharpness waned quite a bit, and I felt that was kind of one of those, there was a few fights where that was the case, and I wasn't at my best. That Yuka Steel one, the TK one. I felt I was in pretty good shape. I wasn't as in shape, I was carrying a little more body fat than that, but still felt decently conditioned. But just wasn't where I probably should have been.
Did you ever roll with Mark Kerr?
No.
You rolled with Galindo.
So after my fight with Mark Coleman, I know that Mark came to the Lions Den San Diego, but it was before I was there. So maybe that was when they were there, and maybe Mark was part of that visit.
Pete, I'm just going to be very direct with you in regards to this. This is a complete and total setup of a question. Tony Galindo told me to ask that, and then he said Mark Kerr would stick ecstasy up his butt to get the best roll. Pete will know all about it. He'll tell you about it, but obviously you don't know that. So
yeah,
I'll wait for our next Galindo interview before we talk.
So, by roll, are we talking wrestling or are we talking ecstasy?
Did you ever fight on drugs?
I did not actually. No, I did one time, but not any fun drugs. It was actually why am I blanking on Ricco Rodriguez? That fight, I was not. I was kind of doing a lot of drugs outside the ring, but I would always pretty much wean off for a fight. And this fight, I don't know, man. I just one of the dumb decisions I made. Couldn't sleep the night before. I was just up, and so I took like a half a Xanax bar, and bro, that had me like just the whole next day. I felt like tranquilized, and I couldn't shake it off. And yeah, it was just going into that fight, felt like I was in slow fucking motion, So that was the one time you could say I fought on drugs, and it was it was not a great story. It was not a cool story.
And so, in the meantime, Tony Galindo just texted me. He's watching. He's correcting me. So that was Vernon White. Pete had nothing to do with it. Ask Vernon about Mark Kerr sticking ecstasy up his butt. So those are his words, not mine. All right, here we go. Before we get to your next fight, do you think that Frank Shamrock may have targeted Mark Coleman? He trained Maurice Smith, trained Don Fry for the rematch, trained yourself, and the rumor was he would call all of Mark's opponents, giving them advice.
Well, I don't know about the rumors are kind of rumors, but the sport was not as big as it was now, So if you wanted to go and learn a particular skill, there was a few guys that you were going to go with, and Frank at the time was, at the top of the game. He helped train Maurice to beat Mark. Because Maurice was friends with us, so that's what we did.
For sure.
So maybe someone saw that he trained this guy to beat Mark. Why can't he train me to beat Mark? So a lot of it is I think just more not common sense, but just more natural progression of things rather than, any kind of,
That's fair.
plots to get Mark or get anybody in particular.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. So you beat Godsey by knee bar. Travis Fulton's got 70 fights. You beat him with an arm bar. So you got 2 UFC wins in a row. And Miguel, watch this transition. You go from one monster to another when you fight Kevin Randleman after that at UFC 23. Like that one. You got it. Come on. Wait, here. Let's be a little salacious. Did you ever suspect Travis Fulton of sexually abusing minors and trading child pornography when you fought him on May 7th, 1999?
Well, wasn't in my. Yeah, who could suspect it? Yeah, that's crazy. Honestly, I do remember hearing about this, and it's crazy to even think of now.
We did a whole episode on it with Monty Cox and Jeremy Horn, and you know what the crazy thing is? Like about 10 years prior to that, a 13-year-old came forward accusing him of it. It was on the news, but got buried. She had no credibility, and Travis went on to do what Travis did. So neither here nor there. Kevin Randleman, you obviously lose the decision, and you get cut. What's that phone call like?
I didn't get the phone call. I think it was probably more, Ken was handling all those type of negotiations. I just knew, I was cut, which kind of seems, strange. You lose a title fight against, Randleman. I don't know why that, warrants a cut, but that was the case. And I think after that, I had almost like a year layoff. Where I didn't fight.
Yes, your next fight is against. Let's check this out. So he loses against Randleman. Pivotal time, gets cut after a title fight. I agree, Pete, with what you're saying. So his next opponent is a 2-time Olympic alternate champion in wrestling. He's from Coeur d'Alene, Valley Tudo, and he's a 3-time Sambo national champion. It's Roger Neff.
Mm-hmm.
Dude.
Yeah.
So at this point, Tiger White has the second fastest knockout in King of the Cage history at 9 seconds. Tony Galindo has it at 7 seconds. Beats Tiger White for that right. What happened with you and Neff?
Well, it was a strange fight because we're up there. I forget what Indian Casino was in Midwest somewhere. I can't remember which state, but I'm sitting backstage and the fights are going, and they're like, "Oh, it's fine. You still got a while to go." So I'm just waiting to start my warm up. So I think at one point I started getting my hands wrapped up. And I'm just about finishing my hand, wrapping my hands and getting my gloves on. And they're like, "You're up." And I'm like, "What?"
Who, me?
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, no, I mean, you're up. Let's go. Let's go out here, to the get on deck. And I'm like, motherfucker, I didn't even jump rope. I haven't, done anything. And so they just kind of rushed me out there. So I'm just hopping around. I'm kind of just trying to warm up. I was just bone dry, didn't able to get a sweat or anything. And I'm thinking, well, fuck, I'm just going to have to warm up in the fight, So I'm just kind of going over, okay, this guy, he's going to bum rush me. He's probably going to take me down. And I'm just going to have to, kind of feel him out on the ground and see how I can get back up. I'm just kind of trying to, go over what my strategy is here. And so, I get in the fight and I'm just, I don't know. Sometimes again, these moments kind of I think bring out the best in me. You just kind of in this down position, this weird position. And so, you know, bell rings, I come out and, you know, I kind of throw a little feint right. And I see his reaction, you know, which was kind of to duck away from the punch. And I'm like, oh, fuck, you know, look at that, you know, that's no good for you, you know.
Big tail.
So I, you know, the next one was the same punch, right hand, but this one was real, and it was just a great punch. You know, it was one of those punches that you don't even really feel. You know, I didn't feel like I hit him that hard because it was just right at the end of my range, and you know, that's all it took. It was just, you know,
6 seconds.
Right hand, and you know, I just see him falling down. I was coming to follow up, but you know, I saw that he was done.
He was out.
I didn't throw any follow-up shots.
Yeah, so he gets the fastest king of the cage knockout, you know, in that company's history. And dude, they've got a lot of events. Like to hold that is pretty impressive.
Didn't someone beat it?
How?
I don't know. Well, I've seen some, you know, you got like, I mean, in some other organizations, but I guess no one's beat it in King of the Cage.
Well, here, I mean, maybe somebody's corner man while getting a guy ready to get into the cage, may have slapped him too hard and knocked the guy out. But that's the only way I see that thing getting beat, bro.
Well, you know, now in bare knuckle, we have the 3-second knockout. However, you start 3 feet away, so it's just bam. You don't even have to step across it. You know what I mean? So it's a little easier there.
Right.
Hey, let's give a.
By the way, have you ever watched the BKFC, the bare knuckle fighting? I do the commentary for it now. I'm not sure if you've seen it. Man, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I have seen a couple of those, but I haven't haven't seen a lot of them. Although, you know, I know that there's some great fights that go on in there. You know, I do watch some of the highlights.
A lot of fun, man. By the way, on a different note, real quick. When you retired from fighting, I mean, did you follow the UFC right away, or did you not do that for a while? And do you still follow it now, or not really?
Yeah, I think I did take a bit of a time off from watching it. You know, I just kind of needed to step away, and it was still, you know, it was a
Painful,
tough
man.
departure, you know, and you know, I was, you know, yeah, just psychologically, I was not, I don't know, I just needed to walk away because I couldn't train either, and it was just like this very, you know,
hard. It's a hard cut.
Hard, yeah, just a really shitty time.
And I feel like a lot of the people when they retire, it feels like I'd say probably 90% of the people I know have a bad taste. It leaves a bad taste in their mouth for a while, and it takes a lot of people a long time before they want to come back and pay attention to it anymore. They just want to block it out in some ways. I feel like most fighters I know are like that, but I don't know. Not all of them.
And probably for, you know, some various reasons. You know, mine was just, you know, I don't know. I just
you weren't done competing, but you had to be. That why be so tough, man. I mean, you're just physically, your body, your shoulders couldn't do it. So that'd be very tough. You know, you have the mentality of a fighter. You're only 30. Hell, that'd be brutal, man. I'm sorry for you.
Well, yeah, I was, you know, what, like 27,
26.
Yeah, so it was, and you know, already my shoulders were like, you know, like those of a 90-year-old man, you know. So, it was tough, but it was kind of like like I said, a long time coming. Really, that whole last contract with the UFC, I was dealing with shoulder injury, the effects of these cumulative injuries, really, and never really had my head in the game.
Nuts.
Yeah,
that didn't help.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you know, even back in the early days, we would do this stuff called Dinosaur training. You know, we went out and at one point trained with Kim Woods. He was the strength and conditioning guy for the Cincinnati Bengals. And he had written a book, and there was this whole philosophy of like this dinosaur training, how like the old strongmen would train, you know, with heavy sandbags and awkward weights and lifting rocks and shit. And So we would do that, and we would just really do like almost like the world's strongest man kind of event. We'd go up to the lake and lift rocks and logs and shit, and just do crazy shit. But I injured myself a couple times, my shoulders specifically. Doing some of this stuff, and just in wrestling. Looking back, I had my first injuries in high school. A ball too hard, or wrestling. Getting dogpiled. Playing the wrestling version of football, and just dislocating my shoulder. And I had hyper flexible shoulders, right? So hyper flexibility and really heavy lifting and certain they just don't go well. So
it's funny looking back, like the stupid things we used to do training. It was like the blind leading the deaf. We just had no idea what we were doing. We were trying to do it ourselves, and it just looking back, I'm like, how stupid was I? Just thinking this too doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, I can see doing a lot of stuff like that too, like Rocky IV style. Oh, this would be good for you. I remember hitting your leg with the bamboo thing. Like, you got to toughen up your leg. I'm like, I don't think that works. You just hurt yourself. So it is what it is.
Watching too many movies, and then you're in all this testosterone, just trying to one up everybody, and it's just you do some dumb shit.
Yep.
Well, Pete, did you have Marianovich's father, the quarterback? Did you have his father helping you rehab at one point?
Well, so I was introduced to kind of their system,
Okay.
And this was after fighting. I had all these injuries, and I had tried physical therapy, and I'd given up at some point, and then kind of tried again. And once I found this system, I got a hold of his book, Provad X. This was Marv Marinovich, and started using this system. And this was like the one thing that really was effective. And not only was it effective, but it was kind of like, the gains would stay, because I would work out a little bit, make some gains. But at the time I was working as a teamster for the movie industry in Hawaii. So we would go on a movie shoot, and, you work just insane hours, like 18 hours a day for 3, 4, or 5 months straight, however long the project is. And during that time, obviously, you just don't have any time to barely even sleep, much less, work out. And, all those gains would be lost. Well, when I started doing this, Marinovich training, I went on one of these movie shoots. I came back out and started training again, and I really kept like 90% of the progress that I had made. So I really just devoted my energy to mastering this system, and I did to a certain point. And eventually I was like, okay, I need to, and this was, after 10 years of just feeling like a cripple, like an old man, and just broken, to kind of see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel of like, oh my God, I'm getting some function back. There were times, like putting on a belt was very, very difficult, or washing your hair. This is like the degree of the limited range of motion I had, and the amount of, these were just like painful things to do, basic things. And so, to kind of come across something that was really, really being effective, I just kind of threw my, full effort behind this, and came back out. This is one of the main reasons that, brought me back out to California, was to, train with Marv and Gary. They happened to be in Santa Cruz at the time, which is pretty close, about an hour from Livermore, where I grew up. And so I started training with them, really kind of, getting a lot of the details that you really, they developed later after the book, and just some of the stuff that it's kind of hard to that wasn't, just wasn't in the book. But, I ended up expanding the system a little bit. I developed a couple of moves that worked for me, because as I was going through it, I'm like, I'm feeling, this is a difficult area for me. And so just experimented, came up with some stuff that they really liked. And yeah, it was a good couple years training with them.
Okay.
But unfortunately, they Marv had started getting dementia, and he moved back to live with his son. And Gary, we continued to train for a while, but he kind of drifted off as well. So I wanted to kind of promote their system and get it out to the world, because for me it was like, man, everybody needs to know about this. And still to this day, I mean, with their system is the future of athletic training. People are already starting to move towards it, but his concept of training and a lot of the stuff he developed is how you develop athleticism.
Wow.
No.
Yeah. I mean, if I could only imagine the different career I would have had if I would have understood how to train. If I was doing this rather than, lifting fucking rocks and trying to bench 400 pounds, it would have been a whole other game, whole other ballgame.
Yeah, but hey, we're transmitting this podcast live. It's our first time, and we got a bunch of hardcore people. Mike Crane, obviously, leading the crew in the comments. Petey, everybody says hello. They want to remind you that King of the Cage was in Michigan. I believe it's the Soaring Eagle Casino, which is surrounded by pine forest. I think there's nothing around there.
It was in the middle of nowhere. Absolutely, in the fucking middle of nowhere.
So that's where Coleman said that they started their issues with the UFC, because the casino wasn't big enough for them, and there was no place to go outside of it. So everybody was pretty much privy to whatever the debauchery that entailed with them. All right, so your post-fight interviews with Rafiel Torre. I know he also went to your gym and did interviews. Currently on our channel, we've got the Rafiel Torre, Gerald Struppent murder tapes. We've got 3 episodes up. I think we got another one going up either this week or next week. Did you ever interact with Rafiel at all?
That name sounds so familiar, but I am so hazy on a lot of a few of the years there.
Where once again, Mike, the marijuana, remember?
You're right, it was marijuana. He is smoking on weed. Yeah. So Rafiel Torre essentially murders his girlfriend's husband, entangles Joe Rogan, Chris Brennan, and Gerald Struppent into the mix. And it was pretty salacious, but if you don't remember, you don't remember. Okay, so your next opponent, we're wrapping up. I know we've taken up a lot of your time. Your next opponent, Rick Mathis, his first opponent is Trey Telligman. He loses. He then goes on a 10-fight winning streak, and you end up fighting him at the famous King of the Cage event, Wet and Wild, but it was right before the rain came down.
Well, it was in between, actually. It was raining earlier. Yeah, it was raining earlier in the fights, and people were slipping all over the fucking place. And there was this sun net kind of thing over the arena, which was kind of holding some of the water, and it was still dripping down.
Yeah.
But in between fights, they had wiped up the ring, wiped up the mat. So for my fight, it was a lot drier than some of the earlier fights, and I think it might have started raining again after my fight. But I wasn't in there for the wettest of the matches. It was still pretty slippery, though. It was not. It was very weird, but some of the earlier matches, these guys was on a fucking slip inside.
The rain was coming down sideways at points. Yeah,
it was cold as fuck too.
What was your relationship like with Terry Troublecock? or Chris Cordero?
Terry, he was always cool to me. You know, we weren't really, hanging out as much as like really at all. I mean, I know that some of the other guys were around him with Ken and Vern and Tony, because they were down there and doing a lot more fights than I was. I was there for almost 2 years and had a couple fights in the organization, but wasn't there as much as these guys with all the other fighters that they took there.
So you beat Rick Mathis, corner stoppage at that Wet and Wild event. You get back to the UFC. What is it like showing up to the venue, May 4th, 2001, UFC 31, and seeing Semmy Schilt as your opponent? Current king of Pancrase at that time.
I was, you're a little thrown off just, standing next to a guy, that tall. You're like, fuck, how am I gonna get some attacks on this guy? And, but I've fought big guys. I've fought random guys before. And I was going in there with somewhat of a game plan, but, again, at this point, I was already a little bit psychologically not fully there. My training camp leading up to this, my left shoulder just kept fatiguing out on me, like getting so, I can't explain it. Just like that fatigue where like you can't even lift it. The muscle's just so burnt out that it's useless. So I'm
how about his strength? How about his strength?
Well, he was a pretty strong guy. He has massive hands. So, he at one point in the first round, I was mounted on him. He grabbed my wrist, and I was too busy trying to fight out of his grip rather than kind of coming around with some pressure or elbows. And, his hands, again, is massive. It's like, I'm sure holding my wrist was like holding a baby's wrist. And so he got himself out of that first round, just really on that alone.
Yeah, he's just a monster. He's just a specimen. It's like he was made in a lab. That guy.
Yeah. No, he is freakishly big, and I can tell you. His feet are also freakishly big, and his legs are long. And you might think, oh, I'm out of range, but you're not out of range.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. Chris, were you at Gotzi's fight when he fought Schilt?
No, but I was there several times in Japan when he fought. And I just remember he did such a great job. If you just grab a guy and he just pull their head right in the knee because his knee was right there, and bam! I mean, he had very good knees for Pancrase, and he kneed a lot of people in the head and knocked a lot of people out with those knees.
See, and that's kind of what I was more concerned about. I was kind of keeping my eyes on his knees, and I had my guard really high, and that's where he snuck in those front kicks to the liver. I had no defense down there.
Yeah. When they in Japan, when they were putting Genki Sudo up against like Butterbean, I was always hoping for like a 125er going up against Semmy, just to watch that car crash.
You see, when Minowa fought him, he does this little somersault to get in on the single leg. It's pretty impressive. Like he's back there and he does a front somersault and goes right into a single leg. I thought that was pretty impressive when he did the Semmy Schilt. So
yeah.
Minowa's a crazy person, you know that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So you fight Ricco Rodriguez and your career Frank Mir. You're 26 years old, and you retired from injuries. But
yeah,
Miguel, go ahead, buddy. I apologize.
No sweat. So Semmy Schilt's UFC 31. Ricco Rodriguez is UFC 34. I think right around there, Zuffa bought the UFC. Did you feel that going from one show to the next, or what's your impression of Zuffa? Because you got them at the very beginning.
Yeah, well, actually, they bought it before the semi fight because that 3-fight contract was under Zuffa.
There you go.
And Dana White came down and took us to dinner and kind of wined you and dined you for
when you say us, who's us?
Who's us?
Yeah, who Dana take to dinner?
Me, Ken, I think Bob was there. They were kind of like the management side of things. So yeah, it was just the three of us. It was him and maybe another one of the UFC staff.
Okay.
Nice. It's one of those meals where you look at the price on the menu and then you order that.
Yeah, well, they were just ordering shit. And this maybe was like a, precursor or some kind of like a sign, but they ordered like this huge tower of seafood. There was like oysters and snails and all this, seafood stuff. And I'm a heavyweight at the time, so I was just mowing down. I ate like half of that thing. And I swear to God, the food poisoning I got after that meal, and I've had food poisoning a few times, was the worst of my life. Like, oh my God.
85. You could have made 85, huh?
I was destroyed for days, for like a week. Wow. It was rough.
Thanks, Shane.
Yeah. You've got and we're done at this, but you've got a real even keel personality. Like you're not making the news. But right. You're also smart enough to kind of realize what's happening around you. What was your opinion of Bob Shamrock?
Bob was a good guy. I mean, he was, I don't know what, just what his general demeanor. I mean, what exactly?
Well, was he a good guy? Was he an opportunist? Was he somebody you got along with? Was he somebody you avoided?
No, you got along with him. He was very strongly opinionated, and he definitely, I was not like his favorite guy because I wasn't the rip 6-pack ab kind of fighter. I was always a little bit, carried more body fat and a little bit pudgier. And even though I look back and I'm like, fuck, man, I was in some pretty good shape, but still compared to like these other guys, yeah, you're not as in shape. So he had his weird quirks. I know. I mean, I listened to Tony's podcasts, and so they mentioned his
leanings.
The thing is, both Frank and Jason describe him, as a decent man, and it would seem to me that you and Jerry are kind of like clean-cut guys that kind of hide some of Ken's stuff too from Bob. Did you ever get that feeling?
Well, I think Bob. I mean, Ken was one of the troubled boys that went through Bob's, program, I think, and then ended up being a counselor. Frank was also there. I mean, that's how Ken got the Shamrock name. He was adopted by Bob, and Bob was a good guy. He was was a giving guy, and he and Ken and didn't always get along, but I don't think anyone really gets along with Ken great all the time, and but yeah, Bob was good, and I remember talking to him when he was dying of complications from diabetes, and he called, and I just kind of had a small chat with him, but it was kind of good to talk to him before he passed.
That's cool.
Because he did he did a lot for us, even though, he kind of through managing Ken and his craziness, and yeah, I think Bob's a good guy. I can't say anything.
Here, Pete, let me just be I'm not trying to be overly direct here, but
sure.
Do you think there was ulterior motives to him having this boys' home, or do you think he did it out of the goodness of his heart? Because whatever leanings or proclivities he may have had, I don't care. Like his intent, I think, is the content of his character.
No, I think. I do think he was gay. He was married before, and he had this home. I think he started it with his then wife, but I don't think it was. At least it didn't come off to me as it was anything other than a thing that him just being a good person and a good person.
Okay, and that's it. Everything else, who cares? That's the way I look at it.
Exactly. I mean, the fact that he happened to also, be gay, but he was like kind of old school. He wasn't. He was like, nice art and statues of Greek, guys kind of gay. He wasn't,
like fountains of kids peeing.
No, nothing like that. He was more into the 6-pack ab kind of thing. But again, that's kind of, I never saw anything that would make me feel uncomfortable around.
Hey, everybody reports that the guy was, whatever he liked, but he never let it affect him and never really crossed the line. Nobody's reporting him crossing the line, so you got to chalk it up as a decent man.
Okay, Miguel, we will get crucified if we don't ask this question. And dude, Pete, this is it.
Yeah.
When Bohlander fought Ferozo, he went to the ring that looked like he had road rash on him from like cuts and bruises. And they said the reason he was able to get that fight was due to the fact that you two fought in the gym, and whoever won that fight got to represent Lions Den in the UFC.
Yes, that is true.
Okay.
Ken, it was this David Goliath tournament, and Ken just shows up one day and is like, all right, there's this position open for the UFC. And this was like where I was like 6 months in the training. This was very early. And I'm thinking, what the fuck is this guy, thinking? What, and, Jerry was maybe like 9 months in the training. So he's like, you two are going to fight, and whoever wins gets this. And he's like, and if I feel that either of you are not fighting, to your ability, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna beat the shit out of both of you. So we're like, fuck, okay, So me and Jerry, we're friends from high school, and we got to fight each other, and we did. We were going after each other, and Jerry, let's say Jerry got me in a leg lock, and I was happy to see him go to the UFC, because I felt I wasn't ready for for that, and I think that was like the best situation that could happen, because Jerry like really fucking gutted it out in that. I mean, he was definitely ready for that, and it just was tough, that format. I think he would have beat Gary too if he didn't have that full 10-minute fight with Ferozo, and Gary had like a 10-second fight.
Okay, but how far out of that UFC event did you guys have that? Because Bohlander was still beat up walking into the cage.
Well, that could have been because we didn't beat each other up that much. I mean, our fight didn't last more than 5 minutes at the most. I couldn't say, but I think it was It was sufficient time out, and again, we didn't really beat each other up. So any marks he had was probably just from regular training or rolling around on the mat, whatever kind of weird mat that they had in Puerto Rico. Who knows? Because I think it was pretty janky, especially in those days. He said it was like 100-something degrees in the freaking arena. It was pretty wild.
So the heroic performance by Jared Bohlander against Scott Feroza as well, in my opinion, that fight
versus Gary. Shit, he almost had Gary out.
Yeah. Well, he lost his teeth against Gary too, but
he used it, but he definitely got one almost completely knocked out. I think he has a dead tooth from that.
Yeah, I think the Feroza fight should be in the UFC Hall of Fame in the fight wing. It's an absolute heroic performance and incredibly innovative, wrapping Feroza's singlet around his neck to choke him out with it after getting ragged out. Phenomenal performance. Chris Lytle, I'm done, dude.
Man, Pete, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it going down memory lane. One of the pioneers, man, and always like talking to the guys who've been around longer than me. You're definitely one of them, so thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to be on. It was interesting going over some of this stuff. Maybe we'll do one with the other guys because I'm sure there's a lot of I know there's a lot of stuff that's been left out.
Okay, so Galindo has been harassing the rest of the Lions Den for us. Like he's just pestering them. And then to call it anything less than that was disingenuous. He wants to do a reunion, and I think Galindo's going to ruin the party for our benefit, of both Williams and Vernon Tiger White. Miguel, why don't we stick around and do the wrap-up after this? That way we got one combined episode, and we don't have to edit it.
I'm going to send you a new link.
Look, just attach it to this.
Yeah. I'm going to send you a new link.
Once again, Pete, thank you, man.
Thank you,
Pete, get out of here, man. Thank you, buddy.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.